Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. Good morning. Morning for me. I'm in just outside of Kona, Hawaii right now. I feel very lucky to be here. And I wanted to welcome everyone to today's Sustainable Change Alliance conversation, Ocean Health, Sustainability, Restoration, and the Circular Blue Economy. This is our sort of second Ocean Health panel. We did one last October that was focused on threats, opportunities, and solutions. And you can actually view the recording of that one on the SCA website if that's of interest to you. And my name's Laura Francis. I am a marine biologist, impact investor, philanthropist. I direct a Sea Forward fund. And then by day, I'm an education coordinator at NOAA Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. And quick description about Sustainable Change Alliance. We are an impact-oriented, member-based, not-for-profit educational group, and we're focused on impact investing, which we define as bringing financial and other resources to double and triple bottom line organizations that are trying to address big social, environmental, or health issues, and trying to do that in a sustainable manner. Some of the organizations are for-profit, some are non-profit, and some are from the independent sector. I'd like to acknowledge the hardworking and dedicated SCA board members in the meeting today, and a special thank you to all of our members on the call. And finally, we couldn't do this without our sponsors. Our founding sponsors are Argyle Capital Partners, Impact Family Office, Maps.com, Solgenics, and UBS. And our platinum sponsor is Nixon Peabody Law Firm. Silver sponsor is Brashears Insurance. And if you're not yet a member of Sustainable Change Alliance Foundation, we encourage you or your organization to join us on this impact journey. And you can visit sustainablechangealliance.org where you can sign up as a member. I'm a member and I highly encourage all of you to join. So a quick note about logistics. This meeting's being recorded. All of you are on mute except for the guest speakers and myself. We have a chat room, and that's how we're going to be taking questions for the panelists. And for members of SCA and panelists, we have an after event immediately following this event. And so I'll just kick this off a little bit. My connection to the ocean started at a really young age. I was so lucky to be able to live in Santa Barbara at that time. And my sixth grade class went out to the Channel Islands, and it was my first time on the ocean, first time on a boat. The boat was rocking and rolling and I got super seasick, but I had an incredible journey and out to the islands, and some divers brought up really amazing sea life that I got to, look at a shark egg case for the first time. It was incredible. And after that trip, we moved all across the country, lived in the Midwest, but I was just determined to get back to the ocean, and that little spark of inspiration kicked off my career, which I've been involved with the ocean for the past 30 years. So I feel incredibly fortunate to do that. And also I'm incredibly fortunate to have this amazing group of panelists today. Our guests, I'm going to go ahead and you've all seen the promo for the program, so I'm going to kick it right off with our first presenter today, which is Aaron Nesser, who's the co-founder and CEO of AlgiKnit, Inc. And he's here with Tessa Callaghan, who's the co-founder and chief innovation officer with AlgiKnit. Take it away, Aaron.
Well, thank you. It's amazing to be here. I'm so excited about it. So we're all sort of. I can introduce myself, and Tessa, maybe you'll introduce yourself, and I can get started. So I'm actually a freshwater kid. I grew up in a fishing family, and we would go out in Minnesota ice fishing all winter long, and in the summers would spend weeks at a time out on the lake. And so yeah, just like fishing and like just really enjoying all that time out on the water. That's just where family is. So sort of my connection.
Great. Yeah, I guess I'll give a brief intro, and then Aaron, you'll take it away from there. Yeah, thanks so much for everyone for having us. My name is Tessa, as was mentioned. Thank you. Um, but yeah, my background is in design, and that's always something that I felt really passionate about. But growing up, our house was on the beach, and my mother is from Bermuda, so we would spend our summers like exploring the coral reefs and having that be such a part of our lives. And so for me to be able to work at that intersection of design and problem solving and helping to support the oceans that feel like such a critical part for me, and I'm sure for everybody else, is really incredible. So I'm super excited to be here, and thanks again.
Awesome. Well, so at AlgiKnit, we are, I'll give you a quick intro. It's like we make a textile fiber for the fashion industry. Um, and we do that in of course, a little bit different way than has been done in the past. So just to give some perspective, fashion is responsible for about 10% of the carbon emissions around the world, and on track to be responsible for about 25% of the emissions by 2050. But sort of deeper and a little more insidious than that is the microplastics that the textile industry and fashion as the largest user of textiles produces globally. There's an estimated 1.4 million trillion pieces of plastic microfiber in the ocean today, and it's enough that we can estimate that the average person eats about a stick of gum per week worth of microfibers, mostly from the fashion industry, every single week. So this is like the big problem that we're just like learning about this, so devastated to learn about. And both Tessa and I, being designers going into the industry, we did not want to be part of that. And digging a little deeper, you find out that in terms of the impact of a garment, between 40 and up to 70% of the overall impact is just due to the materials. So it's not about transit, it's not about the tags. There's so many factors. Textiles is really the biggest one. And if you want to change this industry, if you want to change on CO2, on pollution, on plastics, this is really the space to do it. So what we've been able to do is, and I'll just pull up a slide real quick here, is work with a biopolymer that is found in giant kelp, in a ton of different kelp species. And it's one of the main components, main cell wall components. And what we do with that, is that coming through? What we do with that is make a textile that is just like amazingly soft, super breathable, but we're also doing it in ways that allow us to, have extremely good sustainability performance without sacrificing cost. And here's just like a little bit of a close up on one of the textiles, and this is actually really similar. It's sort of like a heavy knit jersey type of fabric that you'd find on a t-shirt. And yeah, and all of this really to make, textile fibers, to make textiles, to make products that are sustainable and fit into a truly circular product ecosystem. And so our whole approach has been to use readily available biopolymers and then existing manufacturing capacity, then and basically getting a material that has the performance at a lower cost and can move more quickly and get to market more quickly than other eco textiles. And you can sort of say like, okay, what's the eco textiles market like? Like, are people ready to buy this? And I would say, well, everyone I can see on the video is wearing clothes, and so that's you're a potential market here. But you know, the global textiles industry is just like massive. In 2030, it's estimated to be 1.4 billion, and today it's I think just under $1 billion, or $1 trillion, sorry. So we're looking at a huge, pretty fragmented market, but the most quickly growing segment in that is eco-textiles, and it was worth about $35 billion in 2018. It's expected to reach $110 billion by 2030, and going from what is now a little bit of a niche category to something that will be one of the dominant categories in the textile market as a whole. And this is really where we see our opportunity, and developing in the next 9 to 10 years, a $1 to $5 billion opportunity just to produce this textile fiber for fashion brands around the world. And we've also experienced essentially like brands lining up for this. We first shared our story back in 2016 as students, and had some of the largest fashion brands in the world come reach out to us and say, we want to work with you. Can we buy this textile? And we were like, well, it's a little early right now, but give us a few years. And so we've had incredible interest for the last few years, and are at a point now where we're basically developing some pilot programs to put this in real world prototypes in the next year. And a big reason that brands are so interested is because we can hit a level of cost competitiveness. I mentioned before that we can use existing factories. These are factories that are used to produce two of the most polluting textiles on the planet. We can use that same infrastructure with a different process and create one of the most sustainable textiles in those same factories. So that basically takes out some of the really big CapEx that would be otherwise required. But we're also using fairly low cost ingredients that are available at a large scale. So we've identified this zone of cost competitiveness that lines up with other similar fibers, that there's a space where we can come into as a premium product, but also the economics support a highly competitive price long term. I'll just touch on some of the spots where we really make a difference. So of course we talked about seaweed, one of the most renewable organisms in the planet. That is our main feedstock. But going down the process, there's no harmful additives, and the entire process is water-based. So no solvents, no caustics, no acid, none of that scary stuff that would usually be included in a textile fiber like this. And we can take out the toxic finishes, and as a garment itself, any microfibers that are shed are completely biodegradable, compostable, ocean degradable, etc. And really coming from this idea that no matter where it ends up, it'll be okay. It'll be able to go away. And yeah, that's really all possible from just from seaweed, from kelp. And we're really excited to see so many incredible businesses being built around these these organisms, and the infrastructure to grow them is going to be crucial over the next decades to really creating a sustainable materials, a world with sustainable materials and with sustainable fashion. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I personally can't wait to get my first AlgiKnit product. I really sounds amazing. And we have so many questions here coming in the chat, and I think I'll just do one or two, and then we'll move to our next presenter, and we should have some great time for discussion afterwards.
Sounds
and
good.
yeah, Tessa and Aaron, if you see some questions you want to answer in the chat, also by typing them in, you're welcome to do that as well. There's a question about where the seaweed is sourced from and if it's farmed seaweed.
Sure. Tessa, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. So we currently are working with a number of suppliers and, learning a lot about the differences and differentiations of various feedstocks. That being said, we're currently focused on the west coast of Europe, as well as South America, so primarily Chile, to source our raw materials from. However, we're really excited to look at opportunities for expansion, particularly as the U.S. Harvesting industry is really on the rise. And so, really excited to do that. And with that, is it harvested? The answer is yes, but not wild harvested, or yes, not wild harvested, and that these farmers are cultivating them, and supporting those local ecosystems without completely destroying them by just taking them off the beaches.
Okay, thank you. And one other quick question before we move on is, how long does it take the material to biodegrade? And I guess, will it withstand repeated washing? Two quick ones.
Sure. Yeah. So there's still development happening here, but the evidence at this point supports that it will be able to biodegrade more quickly than some of the leading compostable resins. And that has to do with the material itself, but also the form factor that it's taking. And oh, I am getting some echo on the line again. Sorry. And then that always sort of like throws me for a loop. Oh yeah, and then washing. So we've got clear evidence so far that will be good from like a washing perspective. We're still doing more tests there because we really want to know that like it's going to be compatible with a whole range of soaps and washing liquids and all of that, because we don't know what customers are going to necessarily wash it with. But the short answer is yes.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. And we're going to move to our next panelists. We've got Brian Tsuyoshi Takeda, who's the founder and CEO of Urchinomics, as well as Harry Rappaport, who is with finance and strategy of Urchinomics. So take it away, you two.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Brian. Oh, am I echoing? Is that me? Brian Tsuyoshi Takeda from Urchinomics. Let me just get my screen shared. Was it, everyone see my screen? We're good? Okay, perfect. So I'll start off with my story. I don't really have a fantastic ocean story, actually. I was born and raised in the one of the few prefectures in Japan that has no access to the ocean. But my kind of connection to the ocean started in the tsunami of 2011. After the big earthquake in Japan, we had an opportunity to meet some Japanese fishers that were recovering from it, and they told us that recovering and getting their boats and their houses back and getting their life in order was the easy part. The hard part was going back to their fisheries and their livelihoods, to only discover that the fisheries was completely wiped out. The tsunami washed away the predatory species that kept the ecosystem in balance, and due to that, urchin populations exploded, overgrazing their entire kelp forests and essentially wiping out the fisheries. And that actually is a kind of the inspiration for our venture, Urchinomics. And Urchinomics, the whole principle is really to restore and retain these beautiful kelp forests that are essentially foundation to the oceans. So Urchinomics is really all about ecosystem restoration. We're here to find a way to make sure that these beautiful kelp forests remain. But unfortunately, due to an unfortunate combination of overfishing of predatory species, climate change, and pollution, we are seeing these urchin barrens, like I described post-tsunami, developing around the world. Essentially, if you overfish too much stuff, without thinking about what happens to the rest of the trophic ecosystem, you get these little critters exploding and grazing down the entire kelp forests and really turning them into lifeless desert-like barrens. In the state of California, we've already seen, particularly in the north, over 95% of the kelp forests are now gone, and it's primarily these purple guys. So what we do at Urchinomics is we specifically target these ecologically destructive urchins. So not the ones that are in equilibrium with nature, but specifically the ones that have exploded in population, and we target these guys. We then rehome them in our proprietary aquaculture systems. And then we provide a naturally derived formulated feed, and we feed them and we fatten them up, and we essentially convert them from an ecological pest that is preventing the kelp forest from recovering and turning it into one of the world's most premium seafoods, or uni, in a time period of about 6 to 12 weeks. By removing the sea urchins from the ocean floor, we reduce the grazing pressure that is being applied on the kelp forest, which allows the kelp forest to essentially rejuvenate and rebound. When the kelp forest comes back, the microscopic predators that live on the kelp fronds eat away at the urchin larvae, breaking that vicious cycle of the urchin barren persisting. Those little micropredators become the food for the little fish become the food for the large fish, and we get the ecosystem back again. With kelp forest recovering, we also have, of course, the binding and sequestration of carbon. The kelp protects from wave-related erosion, as well as reduces the effects of ocean acidification. But perhaps most importantly, we're talking about potentially creating full-time jobs in rural communities throughout the world, which is part of the reason why overfishing typically happens. It's not because we want to pillage the ocean. It's usually because coastal communities want to send their kids to school just like anyone else. And so by creating an alternative opportunity for them, we're trying in our little way to tackle the core of the problem. I'm going to hand it off to Harry to show you a very, very short video of how quickly and how robustly kelp forests can recover once they're given a chance. So I'll pass that to Harry now.
Can you see my screen? Hopefully this video works. Here we go. So we have two sort of small scale examples of kelp forest restorations that have gone on. One study is in Norway. This is where it's one of the densest barrens in the world. About 80 billion urchins are estimated to be in these. And what we did was we just put a net pen right in the middle of it, removed the urchins from that to observe how quickly the kelp is able to grow back. This is a slower growth species, and it's in a place with very little sunlight. So after about 6 months, you can see some turf algae growing back. And after about 9 months, you can see a significant change in kind of the biodiversity and production of the ecosystem. This one's near and dear to a lot of people here in California, just outside of LA. And so this is obviously more sunlit area and a larger, faster growing species, about 1.5 feet a day. And so after about 3 weeks, you can see that these prawns are already growing back pretty significantly. And then after about 4 months, you can see a full-fledged 30-foot tall plus ecosystem revived. And so that's really the goal of what we're doing. We're pulling those urchins off of the barrens, and in their place results a restored kelp forest. And then also just wanted to share a little bit about the ask for us. So the main kind of thing that we're marketing today is Urchinomics Impact Initiative. So really the goal here is to scale near-term restoration in places that for-profit interests probably can't take as near-term of a risk. And so in this case, we have a site identified in partnership with the Santa Monica Bay Foundation. It's in Southern California, and the way that it works, in short, is our nonprofit partner, the Bay Foundation, will own that site. We will manage it and build it under a management agreement. And then we're looking for philanthropic funds to come in and fund the construction and the operations of that site as we go forward. Just briefly, we're also doing a for-profit raise. We're making pretty solid progress there. And at this point, looking for really highly strategic investors, but happy to have conversations about both. That's it, Laura.
Oh.
Try to keep it short.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited about this problem or this project and Urchinomics. You're solving so many problems at the same time. So providing jobs, and then there's food security issues and climate change and ocean acidification and restoring kelp forests. So I love that it touches on all of those different areas. We need definitely more thinking like this in this space. And if you guys have, if anyone on the call has questions, please feel free to type them into the question box. And so you're working with the Bay Foundation, and is that throughout all of California? Do you have sites identified, or primarily the one down in LA? And I think you mentioned one maybe off San Francisco.
We have multiple sites that we're eyeing in California, but as you probably know, California is very challenging in many ways to get this type of venture off the ground. The one that I think is the most immediate is the one in Ventura, and we think that this will hopefully kind of trigger more opportunities to come to the pipeline. But beyond California, we're also, of course, we have our commercial site in Japan that is, I think, will be done in a couple of weeks. We have, let's say, 3 or 4 other sites that we're planning to build out in Japan as well. We have our pilots in Canada, as well as our pilots in Norway. So we're really trying to deploy as quickly as possible, because the barren problem is accelerating faster than a for-profit company could keep up with. So we're really trying to get out there, and like for-profit ventures, we will fund it. But for blended finance opportunities, or concessionary capitalists, or other opportunities where if we can get things happening, we're open to doing that, because we can't wait.
Awesome. And are the purple urchins that you're I'll just say fattening up, the ones that you're making tasty here, are they for export, or are they for local consumption?
Ideally, we would like to get as much local consumption done as possible, just to keep our carbon footprint down. But of course, if we are able to produce so much, and well, you have a lot of purple urchins, if we need to export, of course, we can use our channels in Japan, as well as in the wider East Asia to distribute as well. But I think the idea is to try to get as much consumption locally as possible, just to kind of reduce our dependency on airplanes.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We're going to go on to Gracie White, who is the Ocean Investment Manager with Conservation International Ventures LLC, and I believe a former Bren student, lived in Santa Barbara, and so we're excited to have you on our call as well.
Thanks so much, Laura. I'm going to share my screen. I'm a visual person. I retain information better when I can see it, and I know I'm not the only one, so I have some slides. Is everyone able to see that okay? Okay. Yeah, so like Laura mentioned, my name is Gracie, and I'm the Oceans Investment Manager for Conservation International Ventures. And yeah, like everyone here, I've been passionate about the ocean for my entire life, despite also being a Minnesota kid. Like Aaron, I did my fair share of snorkeling in murky lakes, but no, I you do what you can with what you've got. But in college, I got really into sustainable aquaculture, specifically seaweed farming. After graduating undergrad, I worked on a kelp farm, and then later co-founded a company to reduce livestock methane emissions with red algae. And then more recently, I graduated from the Bren School here in Santa Barbara with a master's in marine resource management. And I was really drawn to impact investing because, I mean, as you all know, like most of the problems facing our natural world, and especially our oceans, are incredibly time sensitive. And while solutions to a lot of our problems exist, they need money to operate at a meaningful level. And so that's also why I really admire CI's impact first investment lens. So what I'll do is I'll just give you a quick overview of the fund, kind of how it works. I'll highlight a few of our portfolio companies and briefly mention a few like priority areas of interest that we're looking forward to exploring over the next year. So yeah, what is CI Ventures? it's an investment fund that provides loans to small and medium-sized enterprises that benefit both ecosystems and human well-being. So then as loans are paid back, they can be used to make future investments. And over time, this revolving fund can grow and have additional capital to continuously reinvest in conservation efforts. And we really have two main goals with our investment strategy. So one is obviously impact for people and planet. And then the second is really to fill like a financing gap between philanthropic and traditional VC funding sources. So on the impact side of things, we really try to emphasize projects that have potential for impact in critical landscapes and seascapes, specifically Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Indo-Pacific. The fund also has several targets. So we want to see a really large area of land and sea sustainably managed. We want to create a bunch of jobs and support even more livelihoods through our portfolio companies. And then we also care a lot about catalyzing co-financing. So over 10 years, we'd like to see 200 million in co-financing into these initiatives. The second part of kind of the venture's mission is to bridge the financing gap. You know, if you think about where money goes from traditional philanthropic grants and where it goes in traditional venture capital, there's kind of a gap in between the two. And so we really want to invest in pioneering enterprises operating in these frontier and emerging markets. And these startups face challenges in raising risk-tolerant capital and securing technical and other resources needed to demonstrate performance and meet investor expectations for when they do get to a point when they want to raise more traditional venture capital. And, you know, we really believe these enterprises have strong potential to deliver both impact and financial returns. We also recognize that they require quite a lot of flexibility and some creative financing solutions. And so something really great about CI is that we can offer that flexibility. So we have a variety of concessionality features, but the one that I think is most interesting is performance-based interest reductions for impact targets. So since we're a debt fund, there is interest on loans, but we can work with portfolio companies to set targets like a certain amount of bycatch reduced in fishing or a certain number of full-time employees or livelihood supported. And if they meet those targets, then we can reduce the interest on the loans. Yeah, so I'll share a little bit about some of our portfolio companies next. The first is Jala. So Jala is a woman-led, Indonesian-owned tech startup that's developed cost-effective water quality monitoring tools to enable like smallholder aquaculture producers, primarily shrimp farmers at this point, manage pond environmental conditions in real time. And this is important because not only does better water quality management help prevent disease and pollution into nearby waterways, but the company in their last ESG report, they reported 5 full-time employees and over 2,000 farms using their technology, which was really exciting. And the founder, Liris, was actually just featured in Indonesia's 30 under 30 list, which was really cool to see. Another company that we invested in is Safetynet Technologies. And they design and build these light emitting devices that fishers can retrofit to commercial fishing gear to attract the fish that they mean to catch and repel the fish they don't, which can really significantly reduce bycatch. And just so we're all on the same page, bycatch is essentially non-target fish species caught and generally killed, essentially. And that is a pretty big environmental problem internationally. And so trials with this device from Safetynet actually showed that they can reduce bycatch by up to 90%. And not only is that good ecologically, but it also increased the fishing trip revenues by up to 50%. The last company I'll highlight here is Victory Farms. So Victory Farms produces tilapia on Lake Victoria, and they sell to low-income neighborhoods across Kenya. And their mission is to build a tilapia farm that can feed 2 billion people with affordable, accessible, and healthy protein over the next 2 decades, while also taking pretty extensive measures to protect and restore the environment in which they operate. And what's really exciting about this one is that because it's, one of the first aquaculture producers on Lake Victoria, we can really work with them to make sure that there's adequate regulation and monitoring in place and introduced to kind of steer the aquaculture industry as it evolves in a as sustainable as possible way. So looking ahead, I mean, there's so many different areas in the blue economy that we're excited about and would be interested in investing in, but there's sort of 3 in particular that I think will be a pretty big focus this year. The first is supply chain traceability, a pretty common topic, but it's an important one. So we'll be looking to promote really cost-effective solutions that enhance seafood supply chain transparency and traceability, especially with an eye towards social responsibility. We're also very passionate about the protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030 goal. And so we're looking to really address some of the economic barriers to effective monitoring, potentially through investing in technology solutions such as remote sensing. And then finally, like I said, my background is mostly in seaweed farming. So personally, I'm very excited to really explore macroalgae value chains. So especially looking at end uses that really can reduce harmful impacts to ecosystems, promote climate mitigation and adaptation benefits, and also promote equitable value chains. So very excited that algae was featured by some of our other panelists today. I love the work that you guys are doing. Yeah, that's really what I've got. I will also mention that I've only been at CI for just under 3 months now. So if there's any questions that I can't answer, I will do my best to find out and connect with you offline, but I'll do my best to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Gracie. And is CI Ventures currently fundraising, and what kind of capital are you able to take? Would investors on the call here be able to participate?
Yeah, great question. So I think we're generally always raising to some extent. And, I think because we aim to really pioneer truly flexible and founder-friendly debt financing. So at this point, our fund is using philanthropic capital. It's a specific niche and it does require pretty risk-tolerant capital. But I will also add that as CI is a 501c3, donors do get tax benefits from giving. And what I think is especially compelling is that since our fund is revolving, we can make donations go really kind of a long way. So instead of a one-time grant that disappears, the money that gets donated, it grows, it feeds back into the fund, and it can pay for more future investments. I will also add that in future, I know we're exploring other forms of investment into our fund that would provide returns to investors, but we're just not quite at that stage yet. Great.
And how do you source your borrowers? Do you have local partners for that?
We do have several local partners, but SCI is a very global organization, so we have partners kind of all over the world. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. I wasn't aware of all of those companies that you're investing in, and really interesting work. And now we're going to go to our final speaker, who is Todd Crescenzo, who's the founder and managing partner of Clear Creek Investments, which has part of their focus is on sustainable aquaculture. So,
thanks,
Todd,
Lauren.
yeah,
Yes,
there we go.
Thank you. How's the audio? I know I've been a source of some of the technology problems, so I apologize.
Sounds good now.
Okay, all right, perfect. Well, thanks for having me. And I guess the beauty of getting to go last is I get to hear everyone's story and then sort of try to tie it together. I guess it's a good thing. I guess it could also be a challenge, but I'm happy to hear that everyone has their clothes on. per Aaron, and from a Noonie perspective, Brian and Harry, good stuff. So appreciate everyone's stories. I am the founding partner of Clear Creek Investments. My personal tie to the ocean is I grew up in coastal New York, just an avid outdoorsman in terms of appreciating the oceans and also the mountains, and was a marine biology undergrad minor. And I never really took the step to go into the science side of things, and found myself at 22 years old somehow in the investment space. And 20 years later, finally sort of decided that I wanted to do something with more purpose, and but still leverage 20 years of an investment career. For 20 years, I managed money for a lot of large public institutions, and then spent time as a chief investment officer at a multifamily office. And I really want to kind of leverage those that background and do something more purposeful. So from the perspective of what was going to be purposeful, the environmental impact side of things, and oceans specifically, was a natural fit for me. Spent the last couple of years really kind of going through different investment thesis. And much like everyone on this call today, I mean, I think the oceans is a really interesting sphere of investability and investable themes. We're seeing competitive, I think, cost dynamics that are shifting in the favor of really for-profit or enterprising early stage companies. And then specifically found a lot of sort of interesting themes in the aquaculture space, given the capital intensity on the production side, and really relatively complex industry. So Clear Creek was kind of born to invest in multiple aspects of sustainable investments, but we are starting in the ocean space. Specifically, our first project is a land-based RAS full grow out of Atlantic salmon. And then we'll be launching a growth equity fund this year with an institutional partner to invest in companies much like we heard on the call today. And if we think about Gracie's Venn diagram, we're kind of off on that right side, looking to work with the CIs, the TNCs of the world, and the Brens of the world in that middle spot where we could be more the institutional capital. It's not quite venture capital. I would say we're really more private equity, particularly as it relates to the RAS build out. It is essentially a large scale infrastructure project. So that looks and feels different than as we would think about growth equity in the fund structure, in the commingled vehicle. And in that growth equity, we wouldn't be seed. We would look to do growth capital from early stage to more mature stage, up and downstream of the producers. So really in the value chain of aquaculture. So that's a little bit about myself, Clear Creek. I do have two of my teammates on the call, Andy and Jake. Just wanted to thank them for being on and being part of the team. I do have a small presentation I can kind of run through that Jake helped me put together, just to give you a little bit more sense of what we're looking at. So I'm just going to share my screen. And hopefully that's about to pull up. I don't know. Is that good?
We can see it. It's
okay.
not in full screen mode.
All right. I'll just page through this quickly. As I said, our mission is to deploy capital and sustainably oriented investments across food production, renewable energy, and forestry sectors. It is worthwhile pointing out that we have two sponsors behind Clear Creek. We have a commercial farming family that is aligned with really using their concentrated assets in farmland and diversification into aquaculture as sort of the cornerstone to building out Clear Creek. We also have a partnership with an institutional investor who is connecting their client base, namely large US public pension funds, who are really looking to deploy capital into investments in these areas. So as I said, we're starting in aquaculture. And we think the theme there is really compelling from both a demand and supply side, from the four primary drivers on the demand side: global population growth, growing middle class with more higher purchasing power in developing countries that are shifting their protein consumption, consumer preference shifts in developed countries. So, US, Europe, where consumers are really demanding healthier, more sustainable and traceable protein sources. And then post-COVID, we've added this one in, which is really shortening of supply chains, and food security has become a really important component to our thesis. And then on the supply side, I think why we're all here today and why we're all concerned about the future is there is limited supply to fulfill the demand drivers of seafood protein. And so we have to do something, and we think sustainable aquaculture and aquaculture done correctly can be a really good source of hopefully taking the biodiversity pressures off our oceans and seeing all the benefits that we all know on this call thrive. These are some of the areas that we focus in terms of the value chain up and downstream of the producers. I'm not going to get too much into that. But I did want to just kind of highlight the differences between net pen, aquaculture, and RAS. And by the way, we're not opposed to net pen. We think when done sustainably and responsibly, net pen is a key solution to solving for the protein challenges of the future. But RAS is pretty front and center right now because it does, well, there's just a lot of disruption going on in the production. So we just kind of outline here the environmental impacts that moving from oceans to land that we think are pretty compelling and positive. So obviously from a wild fisheries perspective, taking that pressure off, having those restocked at a higher natural pace is improved by moving to land-based production. Same with the habitat impacts. Water pollution is improved. Fish health overall, you can really control from a biomass perspective, the grow out in a more efficient manner. And freshwater land usage, those are challenges that the industry is working on is, discharge. There's a lot of disruption going on in companies that are really looking through the filtration lens to improve this. But this is an area where we do want to pay a lot of attention to as we grow fish on land. And then probably the most compelling component of land grow out is carbon footprint. Not only from a transport cost, if we think about the specificity of it, like Atlantic salmon that's traditionally grown in Norway and Chile, where those fish have to go, the carbon footprint from transport in the air, but then also with land grow out, you're close to end markets. So you're really shortening that supply chain from a logistics standpoint. In general, as we sort of deploy capital in infrastructure or grow out facilities, it really mimics a kind of developmental capital. What I mean by that is sort of like a real estate investment where oftentimes you have developers who are going to sort of speculate on land and permit acquisition, but then there's a huge amount of capital that has to go into building the building. It's much like that with a lot of the production systems in aquaculture. Either you have to acquire high barrier to entry permits for open waters, you have to secure land and permits, and then you have to build the infrastructure. So as it relates to deploying capital in the infrastructure play of this, we are more of a developer operator model where we want to have control. We have a team in place that we think we can do this with our partners very well. When we look at the commingled investment vehicle that we'll be launching, the growth equity, it is different. We don't need to have control. We want to be part of a growth capital solution for firms over their life cycle, provide advisory work, but also patient capital and really helping to build the companies. So it's a little bit of a difference that is worth pointing out as we kind of migrate through the investments that we make. Anyway, that's kind of everything from my perspective. That's our logo, our office, and we're down in Solana Beach. So anyone that's in California wants to swing by at some point, we'd love to have you. I'm going to pop off the screen, see if I did that right. And again, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Todd.
Sure.
And now I'm echoing a little bit. I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe Stephen can help me. So a question is, are there opportunities for investors like on this call to get involved with your fund? And what do you have a sense of what the minimums would be?
Sorry, I think I was muted. So yes, right now, the short answer is yes. It's a little qualified. So the main capital that we have raised thus far to do our first project, which is the land-based RAS grow out facility, is kind of spoken for a large institutional base that's providing the $350 million of capital that's needed to do that. As we launch our commingled growth equity fund later this year, yes, we would be open to talking to other LPs that would want to be in the fund. We have been a little more focused on the institutional market, just given my background, and really trying to provide solutions for those investors who want to do things in this space, but it's hard to for them from the perspective of dollars deployed. That said, we're always interested in thinking through other limited partners and who could come in. I think generally the fund minimums would probably be about $1 million, but we're open to having conversations about flexibility around that.
Thank you.
I think there's a question from Stephen on the commingled vehicle or fund, and just to explain that further. Essentially, we would raise capital into a fund structure, typical private equity fund. It's a closed-end vehicle, and then once the capital is raised, let's say we raised 100 million, Clear Creek would deploy that capital into companies, much like you heard on the call today. And so it's commingled in the sense that you raise capital ahead of making those investments. Whereas if you compare that to what we're doing on the land-based RAS grow out facility, we've raised the capital to then deploy into a very specific project. So, you're eliminating like investment committee and decisions in and around what companies put capital into. Whereas when you have the closed-end fund, there's a process to do that into the companies, much like you heard on the call today. So hopefully that gives a little bit of clarity to what the differences are.
Thank you.
Sure.
Stephen, I think when Todd's on, I echo. I'm not sure why that's happening, but okay. So that helps. Thank you. I had a question back to, so now I'm going to open it to all of our panelists to answer questions, and a question back to AlgiKnit. I'm not sure we got to this in your presentation, but are you accepting investments right now, and how might that work? And then I've got a bunch of other questions rolling in also.
Totally. I completely forgot to cover that. Yeah. So we actually just closed a $2 million round 2 weeks ago, and but we're actually right now exploring a couple opportunities with some investors who couldn't get in on that first round that we opened up in January. So yeah, if folks are interested, we're really motivated to bring in individuals that have, this the experience, the sort of strategic importance, who, know the, seaweed industry or the just, ocean ecology, whose experience can really bring something to the team. So would love to have conversations if folks are interested. Absolutely.
Thanks so much. And here's a question about, it's to all the speakers, wondering if you could talk about some of the challenges you've faced raising alternative vehicles as opposed to traditional routes. For example, how does seaweed-based fabric compete against cotton or petroleum-based fabrics? And how does a concessionary lending fund compete with commercial lenders, et cetera? I'm going to get out of the sun again here and let you guys take that. So maybe Aaron, to start that off.
I can jump in here as well.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I think, this is a great question and, a really big challenge for us and a lot of other innovative materials companies out there as well. I would say the biggest challenge primarily comes from education and collaboration. So, in working with new materials, particularly ones that are focused on the circular economy, they're echoing again. Sorry, Todd. Yeah, so their impact and their properties are, of course, going to be different when you're creating something that's completely novel. And so we found that one of our main jobs is not only educating consumers, but also the brands that we're working with in the benefits of new materials and how that works within their ecosystems. And so that's something that we're ongoing focus on within our team and within some of our initiatives as well.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to take a stab at that one before we, I just realized the time, we're getting close to ending here. So either Urchinomics or Gracie, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can say something about the concessionary lending competing with commercial lenders. I think from our perspective, we specifically try to look for investment opportunities that commercial lenders would not necessarily be interested in funding. So if a startup is having success raising capital with traditional funders, then that's usually somewhere where we don't think our money could have the most impact. So we specifically try to find areas in which our money can go further, and companies that are, I guess, struggling to find more traditional funding sources. So I don't necessarily see it as competitive in that sense.
Thank you.
I would say just briefly for us, the Urchinomics Impact Initiative is a pretty new one. So it's something where we saw that the pathway to scaling in more nascent markets, really outside of Japan, was going to be hard to do quickly. So that's why we came up with this vehicle that's essentially a one-time investment or a one-time donation that is a self-funding restoration initiative. So our partners in this example, the Bay Foundation, are already doing urchin barren restoration or kelp forest restoration, but they consistently require more and more donations to keep their operations running. So in our case, what we're trying to do is kind of use our IP and our knowledge base to create that economic engine for restoration. So ideally, it's going to be a one-time donation, and then the proceeds generated from that operation are going to continually feed future restoration initiatives as we go forward.
Great. Thank you. And I think I'm still echoing. There we go. Given the time, I think we're going to need to wrap it up, but I really want to thank all of our panelists today. That was fascinating. And thank you to all the participants for the great questions. And just a reminder about the after event, we'll start immediately following, but it's a separate link. So you'll have to go out of this Zoom and back into the other link for the after event. And yeah, thanks to SCA and everyone. This was a really great panel. And if folks are interested in following up, you can contact me or contact any of the SCA leads, and we can make sure to connect you with the companies and funds who presented here today. So thanks so much.